New Radio Sports Network and 1041 WRLU presents another edition of the show with Gamblers head coach Pat Mikesch. And we're excited. We actually get to have hockey on 1041 WRLU and the New Radio Sports Network this week as the Gamblers return home after a long layaway. And coach, I guess to kind of make light of the situation, we were talking before, you haven't been able to skate at the Resch Center in over a month. How will it feel when you finally get a chance to do so on Friday when you practice for Saturday's game?
Yeah, it'll be our first time back on, and it'll be fresh ice. The ice had to be taken out completely for the state volleyball tournament. So all fresh logos, everything's new on there. So there's the 2 or 3 times a year where the ice gets taken out completely, and this is one of them. So it'll be good to get a little feel for it on Friday and get ready to play on Saturday.
Now, do you have to kind of reacquaint yourself? You mentioned you'll be able to skate on the new fresh sheet of ice. Do you kind of have to also, maybe work on how the boards play again, or just try to get some of that memory back that maybe you're able to build with the practices and some of the earlier games that you haven't been able to see or experience for the last month?
Yeah, I mean, the boards and that should be fairly consistent. I mean, the crew here in the Resch Center does a great job of putting everything back together, but the ice was put back in after the state volleyball was over, and now it's covered again with a couple of shows this week. So it's just getting it uncovered and, seeing where the ice is at. It's going to always be a little bit crusty the first couple times through. So you want to put some wear and tear on it that first day, and then hopefully by Saturday it's in a good spot.
Does that mean extra practices, extra ice time to do that? Are you taking a couple laps to get those grooves in?
Yeah, I might have to help out on that. No, it's just the one practice. I wish there was like 2 or 3 on it, but we'll have the one skate and kind of see if there is any areas that need to be worked on before we get to game time.
Now, as we mentioned, you had state volleyball. Jim Gaffigan was there on Saturday. TSO is this week. Any of these shows kind of make you go, man, I wish I was around for that?
Not really. I mean, I've been here 10 years now, and I've been to probably 3 different shows that, my wife thought would be good for us. So she goes to a lot more than I do. But I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything that way.
You're at the Resch enough, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yes.
So over the weekend, you were in Cedar Rapids, lost 2-0 on Friday and 5-3 on Saturday. And really, when you take a look at the stats, I think the one thing that sticks out to me and maybe something that stuck out to you is just the struggles getting pucks onto the goalie. You had on Saturday, for example, you actually were able to go over the number of shots you had in the previous 2 periods on Saturday. That was only at 8. What kind of things did the Rough Riders do to kind of frustrate the shooting lanes for you guys in those 2 games?
They blocked a ton of shots, and especially that second night, we had our ozone possession time and we weren't finding ways to get it through. So it was something. The third period we did a little bit better job of that, but I think a big part of that low shot count was how many penalties we were killing. We just took some poor penalties, bad timing, took away a lot of momentum from a game that we were in control of.
And when it comes to a team that blocks shots, is that just, how does that kind of play into your game? Because, we always hear the phrase, you make one extra pass too many or something along those lines. How do you stay in your system knowing that, obviously in this case, the Rough Riders were able to get down and block a lot of shots?
Well, I think a big thing is just, using your smart shots. I mean, if they're going to do a good job of getting in the way, we've got to know we have to move around that player, and we've got to take an extra step and get a puck past him and come up with some rebound goals. We did it great on our second goal on Saturday night. Great net front traffic. We put a puck through with a great move by our defenseman. And then there's that rebound opportunity we've been talking about. So it's just being more consistent with that throughout our lineup.
And you mentioned before, and we've talked about on previous podcasts too as well, just the ability to maybe work on those special teams. Usually when you're playing 5-on-5, that comes a little bit quicker than, the penalty kill or the power play opportunities that you have. Can you kind of talk about maybe a positive is that, you don't want to take as many penalties, but maybe you were able to give your penalty kill unit a little bit more time to gel.
Yeah, I mean, we had some great reps on that. We had an unfortunate bounce on Saturday, which led to one of their power play goals where a puck just came off the back wall and hit our goalie in the back of the legs and went in. But, for the most part, I really liked our reps on the penalty kill over the weekend. Coach Peterson had talked to them a lot about getting their clears and working together to make sure that, they were in sync that way. And there was a lot of principles that were very strong that way. So, it's a little bit of a positive, but I don't want to build a positive off of, lack of composure and taking some poor penalties.
And now you'll be able to be at home for a little bit here. November 20th will be your next game at the Resch Center. We already kind of talked about, what it'll mean to, be back after almost a month away. Now you're going to be back here for the last 4 games. And, how are we doing conditioning wise? I know early on, you didn't necessarily have the 2 games in the weekend, and now you're looking at 4 games in 8 days. And how do you get your team ready for that type of run?
Yeah, we had those weeks early, and I liked the fact that we were able to take advantage of it and build up a little bit for later in the year. And even this week's a nice week for us with just the 1 game on Saturday coming off those 2 weeks on the road. So an extra day of practice is good for us this week. Just gets us a little bit more time to work on some of those areas that we're still struggling. And then, you get into 4 games in 8 days is kind of what the players wait for. So this is kind of a fun time for them. And all the teams are kind of going through the same thing. So it's not, we're not going to be playing against a team that's only playing 2 or 3 games during that spell. So it'll be a fair matchup that way where everyone's coming in fresh.
Yeah, because pretty much everybody in the league kind of takes, I think we mentioned before, I think every team is a little bit more hesitant to take those October home games. And it kind of sounds like, for the most part, the league doesn't make you do that. And now we're getting to a point where, you're going to be rapid fire. Youngstown coming to town. That was one of those physical teams we talked about a lot last season, obviously, just because you didn't play the other conference so much. And what do we know about Youngstown going into this one?
They've been kind of like us, a little bit inconsistent. Lately, they think they're a little bit happier with their game, but it's one of those teams we haven't spent a ton of time on. That's all starting right now with the coaching staff and looking at what they're doing, because it just hasn't been where our opponents that we're playing had just played Youngstown, so we weren't watching them that way. It's always interesting to see which teams you're watching all the time, and it's all kind of schedule based on, we're playing Chicago, this weekend. Well, they played Madison the weekend before, so we're watching Chicago, Madison. A lot of that goes on. So we'll be learning a lot about Youngstown. Coach Patterson's teams are always going to be physical. They're always going to play hard. They've got a nice veteran core back, and so I look to be playing against a very similar team that we saw from them last year.
And do you have to rely on that familiarity a little bit more? You mentioned before, obviously, the schedule kind of helped you out with a few of those games where you're almost able to double up on scouting, where maybe you're focusing on one team, but maybe you want to jot down a note for when you face them. Youngstown, fresh team as well.
Yeah, Youngstown is it's a little bit of knowing Coach Patterson, and I'm sure he's saying the same thing on radio about me this week, that Coach Mikesch hasn't or isn't going to change a whole lot in what the style of play is going to be. So we know they'll play physical. We know that, Brad's likes to be quick in transition. So we're going to have to respond. But there's very little difference between a lot of the teams in the league. So it's just, more locking into our principles. There's areas that we need to be better. And I think if we're doing the things well that we want, if we're possessing that puck, if we're quicker in our transition, I think we're a tough out for everybody. So I think this week, a lot of the focus is around us and making sure we're ready to go.
And this is probably a conversation that we could have had or should have had a few months ago. But when you're kind of generating that roster, you mentioned Coach Patterson does similar things every year. You do similar things every year, especially if you come off of a season where maybe you wanted a few extra wins, or maybe that there was something that, just didn't click for whatever reason. How hard is it to maybe not try to reinvent the wheel and try a different style, if anything else, just to kind of keep the other teams on their toes?
Well, the game of hockey from the NHL down, kind of sets the trends. And so you're always trying to learn what that next level looks like. And, talking to the college coaches all the time about, that's where our players are going next. So we want to make sure they're prepared for things they have to do there. So, you're always little tweaks and little things that you might want to clean up and have your team do a little bit better the following year. But I think every coach still has the principles of the game they live by, and you want to be very strong in those and make sure you have players that fit that way to play.
Along that same lines you mentioned, I mean, you're always in the year of the college coaches for sure. As you mentioned, you're trying to get your players to that level. What's been maybe the one shift that you've had to make because of those conversations with coaches saying, hey, you know what, if I want to get my players to that next level, I got to change something here? What's maybe that one thing that really sticks out to you that you've had to do?
If I go back 3-4 years, it's probably the movement of defensemen and having them be much more involved in your 5-man offense and allowing them to be more aggressive and to almost play like a forward in the offensive zone. And that's a trend that's carrying through hockey right now. And so I think that was probably the biggest change, I made, in that 3-4 year ago window where, you need to coach it up and allow those defensemen to want to possess a puck and to be, they're not all going to be Mason Lohrei, but allow a Mason Lohrei to be a Mason Lohrei.
Very good. Well, once again, the Green Bay Gamblers return to the Resch Center this Saturday. The first of 4 games this month, they'll face the Youngstown Phantoms at 7:05, and then we'll talk about this a little bit more next week. But the 3-game set there for that Thanksgiving weekend, of course, for that traditional Wednesday night game, Green Bay will get a visit from the Dubuque Fighting Saints, and then a pair of games against Team USA. Which Team USA team do we get to see next weekend?
We get to see the young team here in our building this time, and then the next time they come to town, it's the older group. So we'll get to the Green Bay fans will get to see both sides of the picture this year.
Gotcha. We will cover that more, like I mentioned, next week when the game returns. We're really happy that we'll have hockey on the new Radio Sports Network and 104.1 WRLU as the Gamblers return home. Coach, as always, we thank you and have a great return back to the Resch Center this weekend.
I appreciate it, Tim. Always fun.
And for the new Radio Sports Network, I'm Tim Coles.